So Night City Wire happened a short while ago, but alongside that stream, a whole bunch of media outlets got to get their hands on the game and release their impressions out there for the internet to read. And alongside that, there's a bunch of B-roll going around that shows even more gameplay than just the brain dance portion we saw during Night City Wire. So, we've got a pretty good idea for, what people think about the game, and generally speaking, the impressions are actually overwhelmingly positive. The one thing that immediately struck me was when I saw that trailer that they unveiled at Night City Wire, and they said afterwards that trailer only encompassed the prologue portion of the game, which really shocked me given how much seems to be happening in that trailer alone. Now, the prologue section entails 3 different origin stories that you can choose when you begin the game. There's Street Kid, there's Nomad, and there's Corporate. And one of the things that was highlighted in Night City Wire and in the impressions we saw afterwards is that each of these 3 origin stories will have you start in a different part of the game world. And it'll have you do sort of those unique quests that are unique to those origin stories before everything converges into the main story. So I've been looking at a bunch of impressions. I've been checking out a lot of hands-on impressions from articles to footage. And I've gone ahead and kind of compiled all of the information that I saw and what people are generally saying, and I'd like to relay that information to you guys right here, right now. So I found impressions from people who tried out the different origin stories. The Corpo origin story starts out with you being in a position at the Megacorp Arasaka, and then you do this job for a Corpo to spy on someone else to help them get a promotion. It's this like rival to the individual who hires you. Things go awry, and eventually you kind of lose everything and start from ground zero. Then we've got the Nomad. If you choose Nomad, you start out in the Badlands, which is this desert area in the outskirts of Night City, and that quest line involves smuggling something, and that leads to a certain car chase sequence after Border Patrol or something along those lines tries to stop you. And then the Street Kid storyline, that origin story, has you start at a bar after a bar fight. Seemingly the character apparently fixes their nose and then proceeds to help someone clear up a debt that they have with a fixer. And so to that end you need to steal a car, but then the cops show up, and those are the starting points for a lot of these impressions. And after that, a lot of people also got to delve into some of the main quests, the overarching plot line. And what was immediately appealing to me was how all of the impressions mentioned that this wasn't like a hand-holdy kind of gameplay experience. A lot of these media outlets kind of got to do whatever they wanted in this prologue portion of the game. They weren't told what to do or how to do it. They could kind of play around in the sandbox and do whatever they wanted. And so, there's a confidence there in that this playable portion works, and based on all the impressions I'm seeing, everyone's just super impressed. And the universal compliment that I'm seeing is that the world of Night City and its outskirts, there's just a beauty to it, a level of attention to detail to it that is seemingly unparalleled. Some people are flat out saying it is the most detailed world they've ever seen in a video game, period. There's just a lot happening, a lot to do. Everywhere it feels lived in. Lived in is the kind of common term that is being used to describe the world of Night City. There's talk of how each district really does feel unique and different. There's a lot of visual variety depending on where you go in Night City. And there's a cyberpunk aesthetic, neon-lit streets, tall skyscrapers combined with slums. Now, it was mentioned by SkillUp that he did notice a slight downgrade in crowd density by maybe 10%, but not to an extent where it was so apparent that it disrupted the immersion of the world. There were still a lot of dense crowd spaces. There's just a general sentiment that the game looks as good, if not better, than it did when it was first shown off. The graphics haven't been downgraded to a huge extent. The gameplay that we were shown wasn't bullshit. It looks close enough to that where it feels like they showed true gameplay back then, and now media outlets got to actually play the portions that were shown off, and I'll get to those in a bit. A lot of talk about how impressive the character models look, how well animated everything is, how there's just so much dialogue that builds the world, and a lot of dialogue choices. And choice is also another big aspect of Cyberpunk that was greatly highlighted. Lived in is the right word to use there. Everyone just looks really alive. Though it was noted that there will be, of course, generic NPCs who will kind of just have one-liners when you talk to them. But there are little details like how if you stand around and look at one individual for too long, they will actually kind of look at you in a weird way, kind of look at you like you're a weirdo. There was mention of how Alana Pierce said that she didn't notice any lines repeating. Like if you just stick around and loiter, people will just look at you weird. And when you have dialogue options and you don't respond, somebody might kind of go, hello, are you going to answer? But lines don't repeat, and there's just a constant sense of immersion. Lots of variety in NPCs that you meet in terms of the way they dress and the way they look. The world feels so fleshed out as a result. Just the fashion that you see, the cyberware that you see, how differently every faction just comes across with a combination of cybernetics, the fashion that they wear, and the weapons that they wield. And just everyone has their own design language with across different factions and between individuals as well. And same thing goes for environments. A lot of people were blown away by the environments and just how detailed every interior is, how meticulous everything was designed. Nothing feels like copy and paste generic. Everything feels like it was meticulously crafted, and it just makes the world that much more immersive. And again, it makes it feel that much more lived in, like it's a real place. There are also like TV commercials you can look at when you stumble upon a television set, radio stations that you can listen to with a number of unique soundtracks that were made specifically for Cyberpunk. And then I noted right here, other generic NPCs in specific settings will talk about the world around you. So apparently there's, NPCs who will maybe talk about the upcoming election or other specific topics that kind of round out the world, give you a better idea for what's going on in the current events, and again, just makes everything feel alive. As far as graphics go, a lot of people are curious to see how it'll look on like the original PS4 and the Xbox One S. The game was played on a powerful PC with a 2080 Ti, and everyone who played it said it looks gorgeous, and it is a real game being played on an actual PC, and I imagine next-gen versions of the game will look closer to the PC version, but yeah, no, it ran well. It generally ran at, like a smooth 60 frames per second, and nothing but compliments were shed for the art design and just the technical aspects of the graphics. RTX was on apparently, and that created some really cool realistic effects like reflections, and the lighting was on point. There's just no shortage of compliments being paid to the visual fidelity of this title. And on top of that, there's no loading screens. Alana Pierce noted that the only time she saw a loading screen was when V slept, essentially. But other than that, I mean, when you're traversing through an elevator, that's not a loading screen happening. You're still there in real time. And the world is just constantly immersive because nothing sort of disrupts it as far as loading screens and technical elements go. Alana also talked about the day and night cycle, noting that 1 real-time hour is 8 in-game hours, and so there is a day-night cycle that occurs. And you can apparently skip time in the game also because certain things happen in specific times of the day, certain shops open at specific times of the day, stuff like that. And Alana was also impressed by the fact that when you do skip time, there's actually no loading. It's a smooth transition when you go from day to night, and that was something that kind of blew her away. There was talk of how there's just so much player agency. You're always in control because of that first-person perspective and the way scenes play out in your first-person perspective. Dialogue just kind of happens around you. There's no like separate kind of cutscene-like element to take you away from your perspective. Everything just happens very smoothly through your eyes, and so you can, talk to an NPC, walk away whenever you want, look around while things are happening for the most part, with very few exceptions. And so that kind of continuous immersion is something that keeps players kind of hooked to the world and makes them believe that they're a part of it. At least that's what people are saying, and this is something that multiple people have cited. And then let's get down to quests. I'm not going to give you specifics on what kind of quests they performed. I'm going to give you some examples, but there was just such a wide variety of quests, side quests, and some main quests, that some of which you'll find familiar. There was just so much happening in this world that there's just all kinds of things that people relate through these impressions, and it would take me a while to talk about all of that. But it was noted that even at the start of the game, there's a ton of things to do, especially after you go through your origin story quest. Once the world opens up, there's just like markers everywhere that you can go to, a lot of incidental quests that happen within the world, and of course there's the main quest that you can perform. And it was highlighted how all of these quests, many of these quests, especially the extensive sort of main quests or some of the side quests, chock full of choices. That was something that CD Projekt Red continued to emphasize before. And now that journalists and media outlets have gotten their hands on it, it's great to see that, that wasn't just fluff, that it wasn't just exaggeration. Everyone's saying that there's a huge variety of choices to make within quests, and how choices are just a continuous emphasis in this world, and there's just so many different ways things can play out. It's kind of crazy, depending on, how you execute dialogue, or whether you just go in guns blazing versus whether you take a stealthier route, whether you open new paths by talking to certain NPCs. There's just apparently layers upon layers of intrigue, tons of approaches, according to IGN, and multiple opportunities to have players even decide their allegiance. You're not just stuck to one thing. You might kind of lean one way, and then at one point you might want to go the other way, and you can actually, there are various points in certain quests where you can do that. And it would seem as though there are basically three types of quests in Cyberpunk 2077. There's the main quest, there's a side quest, and then there's the world quests that are more emergent and more incidental. So as far as the main quest goes, there's the origin story that you do. And then after that, you have to look for the immortality chip called the Relic. A big portion of the main quest was shown in the 48-minute gameplay demo that saw you rescue a kidnapped girl from these harvesters who harvested people's cyberware. And then at one point in that demo, you meet Dexter Deshawn, and he assigns you a quest to acquire this bot from the Maelstrom, who is led by this gang leader Royce. All of that people got to actually play before we got to see it. But now media outlets got to play it, and it works. It all works. Everyone says that it is what we saw, no like downgrades per se. It's everything we saw, but playable, with the journalists getting their hands on it. And what's very interesting is to see how many different paths these media outlets took. There's the path you can take in the demo where you talk to the Militech Corpo Meredith Stout. You get like a chip from her that actually turns out to have a virus in it. You can use that chip with Eurodollars in it to buy the spider bot. That's like one of the approaches that you could take, but that chip has a virus, and so when the Maelstrom insert that, everything goes haywire, and then so it's kind of like a setup, a trap, and so things kind of get really chaotic in the demo. But then there are others who actually managed to get the Maelstrom on their side by ousting Militech's intentions, and it was also noted how, by IGN, how if your hacking skill is high enough, you can actually notice that the chip Meredith Stout gives you has a virus in it, and you can actually use your skills to remove that virus from the chip. And so that opens up the path of allying yourself with the Maelstrom if you pick the right dialogue. And that culminated in the Maelstrom fighting the Militech, and that boss battle at the end of that demo when Royce kind of got onto that exoskeleton. Well, that guy in the exoskeleton fights Militech instead of you because of the different choices you made, because of the different choices the IGN player made. GameSpot, on the other hand, just kind of kicked down the doors on the Maelstrom and just went in guns blazing and actually managed to kill the leader Royce before he got into the exoskeleton, so that boss battle never happened for that individual. And then apparently there's another side plot where the former leader of the Maelstrom, Brick, was kind of, there was a mutiny or something like that, and so he's being locked in a cell, and you can find a way to release Brick so that he fights the Maelstrom alongside you, and he'll fight Royce, the leader that kind of took over. And so, like, what blew my mind is how many different ways this one quest can play out, and actually seeing journalists and media outlets experience this and report on this. and realize that this is the real deal. CD Projekt Red wasn't fucking around when talking about these choices and how many different ways these quests can play out. The proof is in the pudding now, and it's pretty amazing. Skillup talked about how there's this one portion in that 48-minute demo where the trauma team comes to rescue the girl who was kidnapped by the harvesters, and in the demo, the trauma team goes, get back, while pointing their gun at you. Well, Skillup decided that he would stay and see what happens if he doesn't back up, and the trauma team straight up apparently tased him, and Jackie, your partner, would comment on that, saying you should have listened to them. So just stuff like that, just little things like that also kind of add to the immersion and the player agency and the emphasis on choices and how many different things can happen based on what you do. And then part of the main quest can also revolve around the brain dance aspect, which we saw in the in Night City Wire. There are some impressions, like Skillup saying that in his 5-hour playthrough, that was the least fun part of the game. He didn't have fun doing that investigation aspect because he felt like the objectives of that weren't clear and it was kind of a complicated process. But then there were plenty of other outlets who expressed intrigue and excitement at the narrative possibilities of this Arkham style or Detroit Become Human style of investigation analysis sequence that uses brain dance to recall people's memories and emotions, and using that to kind of analyze the scene and do certain investigations for certain quests. Many outlets found it fascinating and really cool. So, yeah, different impressions surrounding that. As far as side stories go, these tell kind of more minor street stories that can culminate in various different outcomes as well. And apparently there are a lot of silly side quests. There's a good amount of levity to Night City in Cyberpunk 2077. One silly side quest apparently revolved around a guy whose cyber genital kind of lit on fire, and so you have to help him out and take him to a Ripper dock. There's one where you kind of become a part of a fight club, and among the folks who fight are these twins who melded their consciousness together. It's 2 bodies but 1 consciousness. And so that's really cool, and a lot of people had fun with that. But then there are also more serious side quests, like stumbling upon a woman who is afflicted by cyberpsychosis, and she uses stealth and invisibility to kind of zoom in and out of vision and attack you that way. And you can choose to kill her or subdue her, and if you do take her down, you can apparently there's a sniper rifle that you earn from that, and so a lot of rewards, a lot of different stories that you can undertake in Night City. And then as far as the world quests and emergent elements go, these are smaller tasks that earn you money and street cred on the side, and stuff that you can do include, helping out the NCPD track down certain criminals and engage in bounty hunts. Sometimes you'll just stumble upon these emergent boss battles, apparently, and just a number of really interesting scenarios that happen kind of like how they do in Red Dead, where there is sort of the main story stuff, but then you are walking around the world and you might find a woman in trouble or something, and you can decide to step in or you can just ignore it. Now, not all quests will be available from the outset, or they might be kind of level gated. You have to earn a certain amount of street cred to engage in certain activities, or to buy certain weapons even, to interact with certain people. And then there are certain missions where they recommend you be at a certain level, because otherwise you're going to get wrecked. They're going to kill you very quickly, and you're not going to deal much damage to enemies. And so there's level recommendations and street cred locked missions and elements. But that aside, the world is kind of open to you, and you can kind of do whatever you want. And if you want to go ahead and do the higher level missions, they recommend that you don't try it because it's probably going to be much more difficult, but you can go ahead and do it if you want. And then as far as the core mechanics go, like shooting, a lot of people were impressed by how it feels. A lot of people thought it felt really good. Everyone agreed that it's not like Destiny 2, where the emphasis is on just first-person shooting combat. There's more of an RPG feel here, but people generally felt that the guns felt good, and each one felt different, with a variety of weapon types like pistols, shotguns, assault rifles, sniper rifles, and that scratches the surface. We have seen some really bizarre ones also, some really unique ones in the demos we have seen in the past. But people felt like every gun felt different, it felt good, and they all played well, and that generally shooting feels good, which is great. Driving, most people say it feels good. I think there was one outlet, I think it was IGN, that felt like driving controls could have been improved upon, or not controls necessarily, but the feel of it. And Skillup said that it was, for the most part, great, but it could be a little more nimble, maybe a little lighter, a little less tanky. So some mixed reactions here and there, but driving, for the most part, seems to be adequate enough where people felt overall pretty good about it. Customization was another aspect that was driven really hard by a lot of these news outlets, just the sheer amount of customization you can do to your character, starting with character creation, which has a ton of options like body type, voice, which you can apply to any body type. There is hair, beard, scar, tattoos, the wiring you see on the face, even teeth color. I've never seen a game where you can customize teeth, but you can customize your teeth, apparently. You can, like, make your teeth pink if you want or something, which is kind of crazy. And yep, genitalia. Alana Pierce actually went into more detail on that front, and you can apparently choose between having male or female genitalia, and when you pick male genitalia, you can pick between circumcised and uncircumcised. And there's also like a breast slider or something along those lines that allows you to pick the size of your breasts if you're going for a more feminine type of body. Now, there is no facial molding. You don't like drag around a slider and see your cheekbones grow or anything like that. There's a number of like presets for facial structure, I suppose. And you get to pick different eyes and different facial features that are preset in their shape. But you can kind of mix and match a lot, and apparently there's a wide variety of options. There's a huge amount of options to really kind of customize your V and make him look unique. And as far as hairstyles go, apparently there's approximately 30 hairstyles that you can choose from, which is pretty substantial. And then once you make your character, once you delve in-game, there are plenty of clothes that you can acquire that will change the appearance of your character and also give you statistical bonuses and defenses. Cybernetics-wise, apparently there's a UI element that kind of gives you a human anatomy diagram that shows you different parts of your body where you can install cybernetics and implants, and so you can see, slots for limbs, or even like the circulatory system, which you can modify to add some self-healing aspects, where if you kill somebody, it'll heal you, and stuff like that. So cyberware customization is also big. As far as progression goes, on top of the cybernetics and the higher tier armor that you earn, there's also leveling up. You gain XP. This is an RPG. You gain XP, you level up, and then you spend skill points and ability points or perk points, whatever you want to call them. And apparently, the ability tree is incredibly extensive, overwhelmingly so by certain accounts. Eric's Gaming, for example, noted that each of the 6 character stats branch out into a number of tabs, and those tabs branch out into skill trees. And this is something that I've heard just about every outlet talk about, just how extensive the skill trees are, with a huge amount of skills in each of the character stats. And so that gives you a huge degree of customization that allows you to tailor V to your playstyle. And some upgrades will give you a percentage increase in damage or other stats. Others might unlock new abilities like certain combat maneuvers, certain stealth abilities, or things like double jump. And in general, everyone just seems to be blown away by how many skills there are in this game. And beyond that, you can also become proficient in certain weapons by just using them. It's kind of like Skyrim, where you upgrade skills by just using that skill. And so an example, if you don't have shotgun proficiency, if you keep using the shotgun, you eventually become more proficient, and that means that you kind of move faster while using that weapon. Your aiming becomes better. As far as inventory management goes, there was one outlet that mentioned it felt kind of clunky and unintuitive. It was they could improve upon the interface for inventory management. Others really didn't seem to mention it, so it might have been something very specific to that individual. There was not much talk about hacking because there weren't a lot of hacking opportunities allotted in this initial portion of the game. The hacking minigame got some mixed reactions. Skillup, for example, wasn't feeling it. He felt like it was just kind of a weird and complicated process, or it didn't flow very well, whereas others didn't really seem to mind it. And then as far as hacking while combat or hacking for stealth, again, not a lot of opportunities in the demo. Kotaku did talk about how hacking felt a bit frustrating. You essentially have to hack a local node that gives you access to the network of an entire area of this specific location. And you hold down a button, and then you can see kind of what's hackable. but apparently because of how cluttered the environment can be and just how much there might be that you can hack, it was hard to discern clearly what was hackable and what wasn't, something along those lines. That's what Kotaku said, and then others just flat out said we just didn't get a chance to try it all that much. It didn't come up all that much in the portion that they played of the game. But Kotaku did note that it was very useful when you did know like what you could do with hacking, and if you figured out kind of the interface, you could do some pretty cool stuff with it, whether it's distracting opponents or kind of activate a grenade they might have holstered somewhere, and just stuff like that that gives you greater power, essentially. It's kind of like what the magic equivalent of Cyberpunk, hacking and what you can do with that. Melee combat was touched upon by some outlets. Most said it was just fine. SkillUp also said it was fine, except for like the sword combat apparently didn't feel very good and impactful, so he felt there could be improvements there. Stealth also, I hear, is just okay, you know. There is some AI inconsistencies with enemies who are kind of close by, still not being able to spot you, whereas others found that they were spotted too easily because of the first-person perspective, and because they didn't have the skills that helped with stealth unlocked because they were still in the early portions of the game. The stealth, I hear, is just fine. Nothing to write home about, per se, but also not offensive. And then a few more details that I wrote down here from what I heard. Crime, you can shoot anyone, run over people, you can cause chaos, but eventually the cops will show up, and apparently they will knock you out if they catch you. If you, like, kill a police officer, that's going to certainly increase your notoriety, and it'll make cops chase after you. There was talk of romance. A lot of peers noted that NPCs do have preferences, so depending on which sort of gender you lean more towards, or what genital type you have, I guess is the better way to put it, NPCs will want to engage in romance with you, or they might not. And they did encounter a couple of romanceable NPCs already within this 4 to 5 hour session. And those are kind of the big details that I thought were worth noting down, jotting down, and relaying to you guys. Everyone agrees that Cyberpunk 2077 so far is living up to the hype. That comes from the demo footage we saw that some people thought maybe was too good to be true, but everyone's saying that the demos we saw, they were real gameplay. It's gameplay that journalists and media outlets experienced and felt was very close to what was seen in the demo, except they made their own choices even and got to see different paths and different outcomes. Everyone agrees that the game looks gorgeous, that the world is incredibly so meticulously crafted, that it feels so alive and lived in, that the visuals are incredible. Yeah, there's just no shortage of compliments for this game, minus a number of qualms that specific outlets have about certain mechanics and the feel of certain things. So the bottom line is, ladies and gentlemen, this is the real deal. They were not screwing around with those demos. This isn't an Anthem 2017 gameplay type of situation where the final game doesn't anywhere close to live up to that impressive gameplay demonstration. This seems to be living up to all of that. This is a real game where everything that was advertised in terms of the choices you make and the kind of world we'll be inhabiting, all of that is turning out to be real, based on those initial, 4 or 5 hours of the game, based on that prologue segment of Cyberpunk 2077, and that pleases me greatly. I'm rambling at this point, but that's pretty much the general impressions I've seen around the internet and some interesting new facts that maybe you might not have known about from all of these hands-on impressions. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on the Cyberpunk 2070 footage we have seen today, and what people are saying about the game in articles and videos. Drop a comment, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.